Hello and welcome to Salem Voices. I'm Lucy Rose, your host, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am to introduce our special guest today from the Salem College class of 1997.
You're making me younger. I like it.
Isn't that great? Beth joined us today from her home in Winston-Salem, and I could not be more thrilled to welcome Beth. Hello, Beth. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
You are welcome. I'm so glad you're here. All right. So once upon a time, you were senior at Salem.
Yes.
That made you feel really young already.
Yes, I love it.
You've clearly made a giant impact since that time, and you've continued actually your own track of personal growth, including earning a degree in law from Wake Forest, which is really cool. Wow. So what I would love for you to do is just kind of take us through that journey, like in, I don't know, 5 minutes or less, and that's compressing like a life into 5 minutes. How'd you get from being a Salem senior to where you are today, and kind of what have you done along the way?
Got it. Awesome. Well, I was a first generation college student. So I think that plays into my story about who I am and kind of embracing who you are and where you came from. And so when I came to Salem, I thought that I wanted to be a doctor, primarily just because I guess going to my pediatrician, and I loved my pediatrician. And I thought, wow, that'd be a great job to have. And that sort of influenced my decision at Salem to major in chemistry and to follow that path. Along the way, then I obviously ended up deciding that that wasn't going to be the path that I would be on, and still struggled to know what I wanted to do, and really thought that I might work in a chemistry lab or a biochemistry lab and get my PhD and teach. Okay. But one of my issues is that I really like to know a lot. I like to know a little about a lot of things as opposed to knowing a lot about one thing. And most of getting your PhD is knowing a lot about one thing. And so I learned that, and I thought, well, that might not be the best fit either. So then I thought, well, okay, maybe I'll look at law school. And I ended up applying and going to Wake Law. And just through my journey at Salem, I thought while I was at Wake Law that I would definitely be a litigator or some type of trial attorney. But I ended up getting a clerkship for a federal judge in the Middle District of North Carolina here, Judge Osteen. And a lot of what you see when you work in federal court, if it's not criminal law, the civil law that you see is employment law. You also see how, I guess, little people actually do go to trial. So it started to transform my way of thinking about what the practice of law would be like for me. Then I went on to get a job at a local law firm in Greensboro, and I worked for them for 2 years and really developed a lot of great skills, but also realized that it was not going to be the right fit for me. I'm very extroverted, really wanted to be working with people, but also kind of got weary of defending and really wanted to be more on the preventative, proactive side of things, and realized that being in-house would probably be the best fit for me. And that was when I met President Thrift, just to ask her to say, hey, do you know of anyone that's hiring? Do you have any advice for me? And she came up with this brilliant idea of, why don't you be our first general counsel and chief planning officer? And I said, okay. And took a chance, a big chance, because not only was I leaving the law practice to sort of follow this non-traditional path, as in going in-house completely alone without any other attorneys there to mentor me. I was also taking on this chief planning officer role, which was really exciting, but also intimidating. And so I took that position and became Salem's first general counsel, which was really transformative, I think, for my career, because when a position opened up, and where I am now and where I've been for 15 years, although the name of my employer has changed a few times, but when a position opened up at Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center, the person that hired me, one of the things that really made me stand out from lots of other great candidates was that I had in-house experience. And so I really feel like taking that chance opened doors for me that otherwise would not have been open. And I've been at the medical center now for 15 years and have done a lot of different types of work while I've been there.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So what a journey. And in fact, it had you coming back to Salem for a brief part of that, which is really cool, since that is clearly why we're here today, is to talk about Salem as well. But what a journey along the way. Now, you chose ultimately health law. You actually practice, in essence, health law to some degree, or at least within a health institution.
Yes. Hmm.
Why is that important to you? What does that mean? And how did chemistry help you at all along the way as
Oh,
to where
yes.
you are now? And do they come together in any way? As we think about Salem's pivot coming up, it just
Hmm.
makes me think about chemistry to health law. How
Right.
is that a part of it?
Well, I think it's interesting. Obviously, there's not a lot of chemistry majors in law school. I was, I think, one of two in my law school class. That there were 160 of us, only two chemistry majors. But I think that it really fit together well because chemistry is about having a hypothesis. You know the rules of science, and then you do your lab experiments and you kind of apply those results to get your conclusion. And law school is completely based on IRAC as issue, rule, application, conclusion. It follows the same formula. And so I think that logical, scientific way of approaching the world was perfect for law school. It was the perfect fit, even though I had no idea because I didn't plan any of that, but it was perfect for me. I think the other thing, as far as health law, what really spoke to me about that is just the way everything came full circle. Because one other thing I did leave out of my story is I took a year just before I went to law school to try to decide, do I pursue getting my PhD? What do I do? And I worked at Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center in a biochemistry lab for a year. So once I got my job in the legal department at the medical center, doing health law is so broad. And so if you say health law, that can mean so many different things because we have our basic scientists at the medical center that are doing research to find cures for cancer, to grow organs. We have our physicians that are out there seeing patients. You have the people that are teaching students, the next generation of doctors and PAs. So you have all of that in this area of health law. And so I was able to take this love of science, this understanding of how research and science can work, also take this childhood desire that I had to be a doctor so that I'm still attached to medicine. I'm still involved in it. And I think for me, it was really important that I had a job where I felt like I was making an impact on society and on the world. I wanted to feel like I was helping people to give me purpose. And I feel like that's one of the things that's so important in working in this healthcare field, because that is an area you can definitely make an impact and give back. But I will also say it has been kind of stunning to me to see how few women there still are in leadership in healthcare. And that's one reason that I think it's important for women to continue to pursue careers there, because we bring a different perspective and we can add so much value. So it's really been exciting to sort of see everything come full circle for me.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. And you're absolutely right. Only 25% of the leadership roles in health are filled by women today. So not only is the opportunity there for women to follow in your footsteps and do exactly the kind of thing that you are doing in health leadership, but it's an imperative that we
Hmm.
do that, because the difference I think women bring to that arena is just vital to have the voices at that table and be a leader as we go. So
Yes.
well done. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I do have another quick question for you, which I really love. You are, in addition to all the things that you're doing from a legal perspective, and I want to hear a
Yes.
little more about that, but I couldn't help but notice on your bio, and you know where I'm going is my best guess. There is something there that says you're an assistant professor in the Department of Surgery. Now, when I
Yes.
read that, I think of surgeons cutting. Please tell me you're not doing that. As much as I'm sure chemistry taught you, I doubt it taught you the art of surgery. So what the heck are you
No.
doing with your degree
Trust me, no one wants
as a
me to
professor?
be in there doing surgery. No,
Yeah.
not doing that at all. That is actually one of the, I think, most exciting things about my career path is sort of, I can't tell someone how to follow my career path because the positions that I have right now did not exist until I essentially worked with the people that I work with to create them. And I think that's a really important part of my career journey is that sometimes you have to be sure that you're writing the narrative. If you sit back and let somebody else write your narrative, they may try to keep you in a box that you don't need to be in. And it would be very easy, I think, for people to look to me and say, oh, that's a really good lawyer. She's been practicing law for this amount of time. She's at that place where she's in her groove. Because I'd really gotten to that place in my career where, not to say that it wasn't challenging, but I felt very comfortable just practicing law. I felt like I'd seen a lot. I knew the institution that I worked for. I knew healthcare. I knew employment law. I
Yeah.
knew all of those things. But I also saw that there were some challenges in our organization, that if I took another step outside of my box, that I think that I could effectively make even more change than I could if I stayed as just a lawyer.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I did is I proposed that we have a more operational role for me, that I would have a split, because I do some very specialized work. My expertise is in how to manage faculty employment related issues at academic medical centers. Very specific. And really, the only way you get that experience is to work at an academic medical center and do that type of work. So when I proposed to one of my colleagues this idea that maybe I would have a dual role as the attorney advising on these issues, but also as at that point in time, I didn't know that she would propose that I would be an associate dean. I was just thinking I would have some type of role at the medical school. And then she believed in me. She had worked with me for years, and she was like, I think you should be an associate dean, which was actually really stunning, because in medical schools, the associate deans of the medical school tend to be MDs or PhDs. They aren't JDs. Yeah, I'm not aware of another me anywhere in the country. And so it was really this collaboration of, I saw a need when I expressed that need to her, as well as my boss that I'd worked for, the general counsel, for years. They recognized that there was a need and that there was this hole that I could fill. And so we all thought outside the box and created this position. So in doing that and becoming the associate dean, I was also able to get a faculty appointment in the Department of Surgery. I do not teach people how to do surgery, but what I do, the surgery department is essentially my academic home. But the type of teaching that I do is I will talk to our residents or our medical students about what your first employment contract may look like, what you need to look for. How do you properly document employment issues to avoid employment lawsuits? How will Title IX apply to us as that changes? Or also things like, how do you properly document in the medical record? So again, using those skills that I have, the expertise that I have, and just translating those to the healthcare environment.
Wow. I think your children actually then might call you a unicorn, right? I mean,
Yes.
you're the only one that you know of in the entire country that does what
Yes.
you do. That's a unicorn. But it also comes from something I'm going to bring up here that it's a little bit different. You have a clear entrepreneurial spirit about you.
Yeah.
Even if you're not on your own, on the outside, starting your own business, you use that same entrepreneurial mindset to create opportunities for yourself where you can add additional value. Is what I heard you say, which takes courage, which takes strategy, which takes forethought, which takes collaboration, all the things that you know are important when you're an entrepreneur. Does that ring true for you as you think about this?
Yes, it definitely does. And I think some of the things that I think about that are important, and some of this you can only get with time, but to do what I did, well, first of all, I had to have that firm foundation. You have to put in the work early on in your career to develop expertise. And sometimes you're not going to like the work that you have to do to develop that expertise. So that would be one thought, or piece of advice that I share as far as this. Part two, to set yourself up to have that entrepreneurial spirit, you also have to a certain extent, have some financial independence. And what I mean by that, I was a first generation college student, so it's not like I have had a huge bank account or anything like that. But what I did do is live well below my means. I continued to live in the same house that I lived in law school while I worked at the big law firm. I didn't buy a new car. I didn't acquire even more debt, which allowed me the flexibility then to be able to take some chances and take some different opportunities that might not have paid as much, but that gave me the career experiences that I was looking for. So I think those things are important. But I think the other thing that's important is continuing to have curiosity and seeing things that need to be fixed. And then when you identify those, not just going to somebody and saying, oh, this is a problem, and pointing out the problems, but going and saying, I see a problem, but I also see a place that I think I could offer some solutions. Now, the big problem with that, though, is if you do that, sometimes things need to be fixed because they're really hard and it's not so
Yeah.
easy to have a solution,
You get
which
to
means you may fail at, I mean, and what,
That's right.
or be,
That's right.
or not succeed
That's
in
right.
the way that you think you would. But it's giving yourself permission to take chances like that. And that's hard because nobody wants to put themselves out there as identifying a problem and saying, I really want to try to find a solution and then not feel like you reach that goal. But I think it's by continually putting yourself out there, then people start to look to you as a person that can not only identify problems, but will at least make a really good effort and work hard to try to solve them. And I think that's another really important part. But you have to have that curiosity to continue to do that because you have to be looking and observing all the time and thinking, how do I make this better? What can I do better?
Continuous improvement. It's
Yes.
always about continuous improvement and
Yes.
failing forward.
Mhm.
Because I don't believe you ever fail. I agree. You might not actually get the results you wanted, but as long as you're learning and continuously improving, you didn't really fail. You failed forward. But you do bring up an interesting point about resilience because you said you just got to keep at it. You got to keep trying.
Yes.
Learn any of these things at Salem, and where in the heck, where does the resilience come from? How do you find that inside you?
I think Salem was such a great preparation for me. And I think this is one of the things that I love because, in addition to being a chemistry major, I was also SGA president. I was also involved in social things. I'm very social with my friends. I was a full person. And I think that's something that gets lost sometimes too as people think about success. It's hard to be resilient if you have an idea of success or you're chasing a dream of success that doesn't really resonate with who you are and who you want to be. I think one reason that I've been able to be resilient over time is because, at least as I've gotten a little wiser and older, I have tried to really check in with myself and say, who am I now and who do I want to be? And are the things that I'm doing taking me to those next steps? I think if I were pursuing success sometimes in the more traditional ways or just trying to do what everybody else expected of me or wanted me to do, it would be hard to be resilient because I think that's where you start to get these ideas of failure in your head. But for me, if I'm trying to be the best me that I can be, there's only one me in the world, and I've got some type of purpose on this earth. So how am I going to use my talents the best way that I can to reach those goals? That helps me keep moving forward because I realize that I'm unique, that my life experience is unique, and this is just part of the journey that I'm on. This is part of my story. This is part of that narrative that I'm writing for myself. I'm not letting somebody else write that for me.
Keepers, I love that. Thank you. And so we're going to take a quick pause right now and ask you to brag on yourself.
Oh boy.
That's hard, I know, but 2014 was a pretty big year for you. You
Yeah.
won two fairly significant awards. I'm not fairly, why would I say fairly significant? Two really significant awards in 2014. Couldn't be more proud. You won one from the North Carolina Lawyers Weekly as a corporate counsel, and you won another one locally there from the Triad Business Women, Top Women in Business for that year. Can you tell us about those honors? And I know they kind of bleed professionally and personally as to what they are and why you got them. But why don't you tell everybody what you did to receive those awards? Because I just couldn't be more proud of you as a Salem sister to Salem sister.
Well, thank you. I think one of the things, Salem, one of the things that I learned at Salem is the importance of not just leadership, but also service. During my sophomore year, we had a Salem signature program when I was there, and that was part of what you did. You went out and you served people. I remember I volunteered with a lady that was dying, and I was volunteering through hospice, and that made a huge impact on me because I think watching her at those end stages of her life gave me a different perspective on beginning to think about how do I want to live this life that I have before me. So that idea of leadership, service, but also just striving to do the best you can in your career field, all those things came together. And so one of the things that's been really important to me in my life has continued to be service to my community and giving back. Part of my story as a first generation college student is one of the reasons that I've had some of the flexibility that I've had is because people believed in me and invested in scholarships. I'm sure they didn't know, well, I'm giving this to Beth Mabe Gianopulos and she's going to get the scholarship, but somebody gave of their money. Somebody was like, I want to do this to help somebody that otherwise might not have this opportunity. And I'm very, very to this day thankful for that, because I received scholarships at Salem as well as in law school. And I fully recognize the impact that education has made on me. So this actually goes into the part about these awards, because I'm really committed to seeing women, children have opportunities. And one thing that's really important to me, and that is to my husband as well, is just service to our greater community. We started a church. It's called Project Re3, and it believes basically our core values are we're going to rebuild, revitalize, restore communities and make them livable again. And so we did a lot of work locally in our own communities of Winston-Salem and Kernersville. We also did work camps that I would take my kids to once a week every summer until COVID-19 hit. We would go and stay for a week and do home repairs, and then doing work in places like Uganda, where I was able to help young girls who, because of their monthly cycles, would have to stay home because they wouldn't even have underwear or reusable pads and would miss school. Being able to go and help them get the supplies that they need to continue their education. So I think part of this thing with those awards, and the reason I am proud of them, is that they recognized who I was and the contribution that I made as a whole person, not just as an attorney, but also as a person who does care about giving back and cares about the community that they live in and sees the value of paying it forward and trying to ensure that other people have opportunities for education, just like I did.
Well earned, and congratulations on those. I mean,
thank you.
What an honor, and most importantly, thank you for all you do to give back. It's just amazing just to hear you talk and to realize where your DNA is, where your kind of whole heart and mind is. It's all about giving back. And I couldn't help but notice also in your bio, as I think about that, in my line of work, I think a lot about the concept of patient centricity and medical ethics. Mm-hmm. And I know that's important to you too.
Yes.
It's kind of an extension really of what you were just talking about. I think
mm-hmm.
It's in the same place.
Yes.
You speak on medical ethics a lot. What does that mean to you, and how are you able to use your belief and your commitment to that in the work that you do?
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing about some of the things that I didn't even realize about myself that probably drew me to the law, is this deeply ingrained sense of justice and fairness and wanting to be able to speak up for people who can't speak up for themselves. And I think, there's the law, which sets that minimum standard of what we need to do from society's perspective. But then there's a level above that. And that's just because we can do something, should we do it?
Right.
So what is ethically acceptable? How do we feel about that as a society? And I think that just one of the reasons that I was drawn to the areas of the law I've been drawn to, like healthcare and employment law, because they deal with this whole dynamic of who we are as people. It's more than just the intellectual portion of the law that I like. It's also that they deal with people. I think medical ethics is the same, because you're having to understand the whole person. You're having to think about all of these factors that go into play when people are thinking about making those really hard decisions. And I think it's also pretty fascinating because you can have experts in the room that still disagree, and you have that debate. And I think it's just so important that we continue to ponder these things as society changes, as the law changes, as everything changes around us. It almost goes back to thinking about, like, who do I want to be as a person? I think we also have to think about that as our society. What do we want healthcare to look like? What do we want it to be? Because if we're not proactively thinking about that, then things are just going to happen. And I would much rather be involved in proactively thinking about it and trying to make sure that as much as we can, the right things happen or the ethical things happen.
And it really is hard to stay ahead of it. You look at robotics right now and the role they're beginning to play and what they're going to do in the future in terms of how they serve people and what that may look like. Just a quick example. It's hard because the technology often develops before we get to the ethics part. And then it's like playing catch up, and how do we do that? The other piece of this for me that's so interesting, of course, is the whole concept of risk management and compliance, which you would also get into. And as you think about that, that 80-20 rule thing, I don't know how much of that's true or not, but apparently studies show that 80% of people do the right thing because they're afraid of getting caught, to your point, and 20% do it because it's just the right thing.
Right.
The constant concept, I think, of keeping that thought process alive is really important. So well done. Staying ahead of it is hard in today.
Yes, it is.
All right. So you've been talking about being a leader, and clearly you are one and have been one since probably you were a little teeny young lady here. And including that you were SGA president of Salem, which of course for me is quite pertinent to what we're talking about. What would you say is your most important leadership learning? What would you say are the most important aspects you think about leadership? And how, again, and I'm just going to let you expand a bit, how did Salem let you kind of come to that conclusion and give you an opportunity to practice and grow as a leader?
Mhm. Oh, I think there's a lot about leadership. And I think,
Yeah.
but a few things. One is, I think as SGA president, you just have to learn prioritizing and time management. Because I remember scheduling in time. I'd want to, because this is where I date myself, but this is where we had paper calendars and planners. But I would schedule in time for a shower. My days were really packed with meetings and things that were exciting and important to me. But then you also had to try to schedule in some of those basics for self-care. And so it forces you, I think, in juggling different things in leadership roles to begin to prioritize, because in the end, we all have to recognize there's 24 hours in a day and you're one person and you cannot do it all. So at some point, you have to start making some tough decisions about what's important. So I think that would be part one in the ways that helped prepare me for more leadership roles. But I think another thing is just realizing that you're not going to know everything and you can't know everything, and that's okay. You can still be confident and people can have confidence in you as a leader, but it's okay sometimes to say, I don't know, but let me check into that. You can tell people, I'll go research that and I will get back to you. So there's no shame in sometimes just not knowing. And then I think the other piece goes back to that knowing who you are and being true to who you are. I go back to early in my legal career. I remember that this makes me sound like a real nerd, but I would take a little notepad. And sometimes if a lawyer said something that was just really smart or they had a tidbit, and I would write it down. And part of that was good. But looking back now, I recognize that there's a lot of wisdom you can get from other people, but some things are just personal style. Just because a successful person says that they did it that way doesn't mean that necessarily will work for me. And that's where you really have to start to know yourself. And in knowing yourself, that's knowing what your strengths are and trying to fill your day with more and more things that really utilize those strengths, but also knowing what your weaknesses are and surrounding yourself with people that can fill that gap for you. Because there's some things that I'm just never going to be good at. So instead of trying to using all of that mental energy and physical energy to force myself to be somebody that I'm not, just recognize I'm never going to be the silent, thoughtful introvert, that slows down. I'm going to be the person that charges right in. But I need those silent, thoughtful introverts in my life to sometimes say to me, hey, Beth, let's take a pause, take a deep breath before you just go in and do it. So surrounding yourself with those people is so important, because I just don't think leaders lead alone, at least not in the way that I think about leading effectively. I think it's a team effort.
Oh, you're so right. And I think about there's it's like a Myers-Briggs. There's something out there that actually looks at your strengths. It's called the strengths inventory that Gallup has. And it's all about,
I've done that.
Yeah, I bet you have. Just saying that, I'm thinking, I know she knows this.
Yes.
You look at those top 5 strengths and you say, I'm going to make those stronger every day. And also show where you're capable of making the biggest impact.
Yes.
You're going to be most effective in serving the community that you're serving. And it basically does exactly what you says and says, forget those bottom ones, hire somebody else to do those. And the fact you do that is just remarkable. I mean, it's easy to think something. It's much harder to actually put it into action. And I don't see many leaders doing that. And my best guess is you do. So well done.
And I think it's hard too, because that's something I spent a lot of time when I was younger focusing totally on all the things that weren't my strengths, wanting to be somebody that I'm not, or trying to develop things. And again, that doesn't mean that you can't always have self-improvement. I mean, I am sometimes more thoughtful and deliberate before I just charge in and say yes, so you can develop those sides of yourself. But to your point, when you recognize, like, because I know when I took it, one of my top strengths is woo. And I remember being like, what is woo? That is the weirdest, like, top strength to have. But when you start thinking about that and realizing, oh, that does describe me, how do I start to incorporate that into what I'm doing? Because that's where I'm going to be the most effective.
That's right.
And that's when I'm also going to find the most joy and contentment in my career, is when I'm using those strengths.
Great. Thank you for bringing that up. Wow. Way to go. All right. So one last question before we turn to Salem entirely. And I listen to you and I get inspired and I think, good heavenly days, what else is that woman going to do to impact our world? Is there anything left in there that she hasn't yet accomplished or hasn't done? If you think big picture, next 10 years of your life, is there something else still out there that you want to accomplish or some other giant impact you want to make that you'd be willing to share with us anyway?
Well, I think, and that's such an interesting question, because everybody talks about having goals, and I've always had goals, but I think the one lesson that I've learned from my story is also that I can't always predict specifically what they will be. So, early in my career, I would have been like, oh, yes, one day I want to be the general counsel at a hospital system or something of that nature. I think now my goals, I still have them, but it's more, they're not quite as defined. So I want to figure out a way that I can continue to develop this area of expertise that I have. How can I continue to grow that to make the most impact that I can in healthcare? Because I really think that I found my home. I've been there for 15 years. And so how am I going to keep using these unique skills that some people might look at and say, well, that doesn't necessarily translate to what she's doing now. How do I keep doing something different? I think the other thing, and this is where you know your personality, but I'm terrified of being pigeonholed, and I've always been terrified of getting too bored. And so I think that's another reason that I kind of have that entrepreneurial spirit. And it's hard for me to say exactly what I may be doing, but I can guarantee you it probably won't be the same thing that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
It will be something different. And I hope it will be something innovative and creative.
Well, two things. One, I'm going to call you in 10 years and let's do this again. Okay. And then
Okay.
you'll be able to say, look what I did in that 10-year intervention. We'll bring this back and play it. Secondly, at Salem, I'm just going to ask you, of course, we're going to have to ask you to come back and teach some courses or something here for us. At least come in as a guest lecturer to teach some things on health leadership, because really you are the epitome of exactly what we're talking about as we think about the future. So as we move towards Salem right now.
Can I say one thing about that, though? I always think it's so funny because, like, that's one of those things when people say that, you're kind of like, really? I don't think when you're just living your life and, I think that's the other thing. I think sometimes we just don't recognize the impact that we have on people around us. And so, and I think you can make that impact. You don't have to be like the top of an organization to make that impact. You can still lead wherever you are in your area. And so I just want to encourage people with that too, because I think sometimes it's not like I walk around every day and I think, oh, I'm a leader or I'm making this impact. I'm just going about doing my work and trying to use my strengths and my skills. And so that would be one of the things I think for the younger students that are out there, is just to recognize that at any stage of your career, you can make an impact and you can lead. It may not be that traditional, like I'm the CEO type leadership, but you can lead from any place that you are within an organization.
Yes, you can. And in fact, to me, the expectation is that you do.
Yes.
Any time in your life and any place in your life that you're looking for opportunities to make an impact.
Yes.
You lead with confidence and lead with strength, exactly as you did when you created your whole new job. You saw that you weren't.
Yeah, if you can't find the right job, just make it up.
You weren't general counsel. You were not. You
Right.
didn't magic wand. You weren't CEO of the medical center.
Right.
Or Beth, wherever you were in the organization, but you recognized the need and you led from within and you led up and you did a beautiful thing. So you're absolutely right. What a beautiful message to send. And I'm going to let you send some more messages to those students too before we finish. But okay, rapid fire. And I've asked everybody these. So just for fun for you, it just kind of gets your memory going, thinking back and putting yourself back at Salem. Favorite course?
So probably, and this is going to be odd from the chemistry major, but I took a class, The Imaginative Works of C.S. Lewis, and I loved it. It was amazing. We went back and read the Chronicles of Narnia, and I read a book I'd never read by him, Till We Have Faces, and adore it. And I think it just made me think in a totally different way, and I loved it.
Whoa. Okay. If we
Yeah.
have time to explore that. All right. I promise. What faculty member had the greatest impact on
Oh, wow. That's so
you?
hard. There's so many, but definitely my chemistry professors, George, Dr. Miller, Dr. Pate, just all the time that I spent with them. There were so few of us that were chemistry majors, just those relationships and the guidance that they gave. And I remember one thing I will say, I remember being afraid that they would be disappointed when I decided to go to law school. And I think it was Dr. Miller, but one of them was kind of like, oh, we knew you wouldn't end up like in a lab. It was kind of like they knew more about me than I knew about myself at that time. And I think that's part of the beauty of being part of Salem.
Lovely. Thank you. Wow. All right. What was your favorite tradition? We'll try that one on.
I don't know if you would even consider like SGA and things like that a tradition, but I think just that leadership and the amount of like just ability for us to have all these leadership roles. I loved being involved in student government and different leadership positions during my time there.
As did I. Thank you. Well done. We're going to call that a tradition, whether it is or not. Okay?
Exactly.
Leaders and say from now on, those are traditions. Okay.
Yes.
Now, if in fact you decided to study, and as a chemistry major, actually the BS in chemistry, which means you even put more time in sciences than you had to if you got a BA. If somebody wanted to find you while you were studying, where would they look for you? Where did you study?
So at that time, being an SGA officer junior and senior year, I spent a lot of time in the SGA office, which was in the basement of Cluel at that time. So it was dark, and I don't know why I thought it was great, but I think it was just that it was private and it was quiet, and I loved being there.
The first one to say that is, I got to say. And I got to tell you, we did not even have an SGA office. So you had already moved way light years.
Exactly.
Because we didn't even have one. So, okay. All right. Thank you, dear. Now, do you keep up with any of your classmates? And
oh, yes.
Are your friendships meaningful to you that you built while you were at Salem?
Yes. So I'm an only child, and I think that they are the siblings and sisters that I never had. And so I think I have so many relationships that have really withstood, like people that have been there with me through some really hard and difficult times, in addition to the successes. And I just cannot emphasize enough the importance of those bonds and friendship, and just how important the relationships that I formed while at Salem, just how important they are. But I'll also put in a plug for continuing to serve Salem, because one of the other really fun things for me has been connecting with other Salem alums that have been from other years that I would have never known otherwise. So through serving through in different ways, just meeting those people, it's been really amazing as well. So you have the connections that you already had from your time at Salem, but I love the way that you're also able to continually make those connections.
Isn't it cool? Don't you feel like you know them, Beth?
Oh yeah,
just like the first time you and I met. It's like,
yes,
we might as well have known each other our whole lives and we never even met before.
exactly.
But something magic, which kind of brings me to that secret sauce, I guess, about Salem. I like that term. I don't know why, but for me, I say that because it's hard to put a finger on it. But I like to ask everybody, when we talk about Salem, we all kind of puff up and kind of glow. We get this feeling that comes over us. Why? What is it about Salem that makes you get happy when you go to that place in your mind? What did it do for you?
I think it was just a place of being challenged to always be better, but also a place of acceptance for who you are. And I think that's a delicate balance for all of us to find internally. You know, we know that there's always going to be more that we can do. There's always things we can do better. There's always going to be somebody else that's a better leader or a better lawyer or better whatever we are out there. So how do we still strive to be the best us, but how do we also have some peace and acceptance of who we are? And I think Salem was a place that gave me that. I was surrounded by people who saw things in me and would push me and encourage me and challenge me, but also people that accepted me, and they were going to care about me and love me regardless of whether I was successful in a traditional sense or not. And I think that's a really valuable thing that's hard to find.
really hard to find. And you're not going to find it at a giant school. Only a place
Right.
is going to provide that for you.
Well, and that's because too, it's small enough that people can know you. Just like when I said that about my professors kind of knowing more about me than I knew about myself. That would never happen if I were in a large environment where I was just a number. And so that just, again, how do you articulate that? How do you say that and put words around that type of experience? And that's why, like you said, I think it's just the secret sauce. You do your best to describe it, but you can't.
It's really hard, but you did
Yeah.
a great job at coming close. Okay, so you've given amazing advice to everybody of every age and everything. But I want you now just to kind of put your place, think about yourself and writing that letter to your 20-year-old self. We've got students that are still there today. We've got ones that have just graduated, and probably some are looking to find that right thing to set them on a path for a career and a happy life like yours. What would that letter to yourself briefly say? Right now, knowing what you know, what would you write to your 20-year-old self?
I think I would tell myself that it's important to be diligent and hardworking, but that I have to remember, or the students have to remember to take care of themselves, because in the end, you're the only person that can take responsibility for yourself. And we are whole people, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all of those things come together. And I think sometimes I focus way too much on, the mental part, like studying and working really hard. And I didn't always nurture myself physically or emotionally. And I think it's important to take care of yourself, because you can only be your best you if you're healthy and healthy in all respects, healthy physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So I think those things are so important. And then I think, again, just remembering that there's only one you. I even have identical twin nephews, but even though they are identical twins, they're still very different people, and they have really unique gifts. The world doesn't need another me out there. The world needs, each of those individuals that's got their own gifts. And so I think just coming to terms and realizing that success is going to look different for a lot of different people. What's going to bring you fulfillment is going to be different than what would bring me fulfillment. And that's okay. To get comfortable with, it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to want what you want. And it's okay to, to be different, to be unique. And that those experiences, I think, really shape the whole person of who you are and what you end up doing with your life. So I think that just that, I mean, it's kind of hard to sum up everything that you would say, but I think that's been the struggle that's harder to come by, is you have all that angst and worry when you're younger, and just knowing it'll be okay, but it may take some work, and you have to be willing to do some hard work on yourself, but you can do it.
Wow. All right. Well, let's bring it home. I wish we didn't have to end this conversation, because frankly, I'm having a ball. Learning from you is a joy, and you brought a lot of wisdom to us today. So take one last thought here. The stage is yours, so to speak. What would you like to leave folks with? Look right at the camera and just tell us what you really want to take home, what you would like to leave everybody with the last word.
I think, again, it's just to know who you are, or really start to work to figure out who you are, know who you want to be, and take some time throughout your life to step back as you reach certain goals and just think about, am I still on the path to be who I want to be? Am I being the best me that I can be? And I think that if you continue to do that, that helps you, again, write your own narrative. You want to be the author of your own story. Don't let somebody else write it for you, because it's your life and you're the only one that gets to live it. And so I think that would probably be the most important thing, being deliberate in writing your own story.
Mic drop. Thank you. I don't even know how to thank you on behalf of everybody in the Salem community. I really thank you. I wish they could all say it to you directly like I can, but I just don't even know how to say it enough. For you to share your story with us on Salem Voices has just been a pleasure, a true, inspiration to everybody. So thank you for all you've done. Thank you for all your contributions to the world. You make all of us proud and really, really grateful. Okay. And all of our viewers, I really look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks from now when we bring another episode of Salem Voices and highlight another amazing Salem alum. Until then, let's count down together, Beth. Okay. We're going to say Salem Strong in 3. 1, 2, 3. Fist bump. Salem.
Salem strong.
Thank you.